Good day, everyone. My name is Stephen Youngblood. I'm speaking to you from Chisinau, Moldova, where I am a Fulbright Scholar this year. I am director of the Center for Global Peace Journalism at Park University and the editor of the Peace Journalist magazine, which will be coming out actually next week. So you'll all want to keep an eye open for that. It's my privilege today to moderate this session about peace journalism in the Global South. And we're joined by four distinguished colleagues, and I count myself extremely lucky to have worked with each of these colleagues in a variety of different capacities. So I will introduce my colleagues as I get to them one by one. And the first up will be Professor Dr. Shabir Hussain, who's a professor at Baria University in Islamabad. His academic credentials are peace communication and political communication. His work mainly focuses on developing non-Western theoretical and practical approaches to communication problems. Earlier, he was a journalist and reported on conflicts in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. So, Dr. Hussain, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And can you see the presentation? Is it visible for you now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for this very warm introduction. So I will be trying to share my perspective about the debate on growing peace journalism, specifically from the context of Pakistan and Afghanistan. These are the two areas where I have worked primarily. So some of the studies that we have conducted, that I have conducted myself in these two countries, and also the studies conducted by a lot of other professors and researchers in India and Pakistan and also in Afghanistan. So some of the key findings are that the peace journalism, it should be considered not as a monolithic approach, rather it should be deconstructed into different grades from the lower to moderate to higher level of peace journalism. So most of these studies in the Western context, they actually treat it as a monolithic approach where it is discussed either in form of if it is present or absent. But I think in the context of South Asia, where we have discussed it, so we have actually found it in different shapes and also in different forms. And one very important aspect is that the agency for peace journalism and the agency for journalists, it is minimized when the structure is promoting it. So to discuss peace journalism and to do research on it, I think it is very much important that we first identify the key determining factors, which would then help us to know that what sort of journalism, war journalism or peace journalism is produced. So I think two determining factors are very important. One is the conflict scenario, which is again composed of so many other factors that I would be discussing in the next slide. And also we need to discuss that when the journalists, they operate in this conflicting scenario, then what sort of journalism is produced in terms of very strong war journalism, very weak war journalism, very strong peace journalism, or very weak peace journalism. So these are some of the details that from the study that we have conducted. So in the conflict scenario, you can see that a lot of factors actually, they are there in this conflict scenario, what we call is the high security threats. These are primarily characterized by like when more people are being killed, the powerful military and politicians, they are involved in these, they identify a particular group, and this particular group is then denigrated for having these for having these ambitions to disintegrate the country. So in such scenarios, when journalists report, or when they operate in these highly security threats conflicts, so primarily they are able to produce very patriotic feelings among the journalists in the society. So most of the times we have seen that in such scenarios, the media, they primarily produce very strong war journalism. And though we may find some instances of peace, very weak peace journalism as well. So, for example, when Pakistani media, when they report on the conflict with Taliban, when they were reporting the conflict with India or also with Afghanistan, so the Pakistani media, they were actually operating in these zones. On the other hand, there could be certain conflicts, or particularly there could be certain phases in a one particular conflict, which may be going through this medium security threats conflicts. So again, it got these indicators. I'm not like repeating these just to save time for their discussion. So the medium security conflicts, again, it has different indicators. And these are actually the conflicts where the military elites and the political elites, they haven't been able to produce a national consensus. So public opinion is divided. So when journalists, when they report on these types of conflicts, so elitism, they dominate. But again, sometimes we do find that alternative perspectives are promoted. So in the context of Pakistan, we have seen when they report on the conflict in Balochistan area, and also when they report on the ethnic tension in the Karachi city in Pakistan. So we have seen that in these conflicts, the media reporting, it is somehow equally divided between where media are producing some form of very moderate war journalism, and also sometimes they're producing weak to moderate types of peace journalism. And it got different types of indicators compared to the indicators which are produced in the higher security conflicts. And then finally, we do have certain conflicts in South Asia, which could be termed as conflicts of low security threats, or also like these can be actually a phases in a conflict where the conflict may enter into this phase in any conflict. And there the journalists, they primarily, they enjoy some freedom because the politicians, the military elites, they haven't been able to produce a national consensus. So the feelings of patriotism, nationalism, and jingoism, these are less. So there the journalists, they actually get this opportunity to actually introduce more alternative perspectives. And specifically in the context of Pakistan, and also in Afghanistan to a greater extent, what we have seen in our published work is that the journalists, they're actually expected, the common people and also the elites, they would sometimes expect journalists to produce more peaceful content. So, what I have said is that unlike the most of the paradigms of peace journalism produced in the Western context, where the journalism is actually treated as one monolithic entity, that either it is absent or present. Here, what we have seen, that conflicts primarily in these two countries, in Pakistan and Afghanistan, even the high security conflicts. So primarily they may be like reported in very high escalatory coverage, but still we do find the gradation in these conflicts. So a conflict primarily reported in very escalatory term, but we do find some form of peace journalism in different shades of peace journalism. And here, I think, here is actually the opportunity for peace journalists and the media educator to actually capitalize on these things. Luckily, I have been able to, and luckily I have been very successful in introducing the course of peace journalism in Pakistan and also in two universities in Afghanistan. So far, what we have seen in these academic debates in different universities is that we haven't been able to really make a real change in the context of peace journalism. And one reason is because the powerful structures, they are actually promoting these jingoistic wars. And the journalists, even students in our classes, they would object to what we are telling them about the peace journalism, because the nationalistic feelings and the patriotism, it is challenged. So they would actually challenge you. As an educator, you would face a lot of problem when the students, they would challenge you. It's not applicable. You are in fact endangering the national interest. So it can be a bit challenging as well to teach peace journalism in societies where the opinions, they are in favor of war. But again, like I'm not pessimistic about the achievement of peace journalism. In fact, in one of the previous slides, we can see that even in the most in those conflicts in Pakistan and Afghanistan, which were highly reported and very high war journalism indicators were there, but we do find that some aspects of peace journalism can be also available there. And here is actually the scope for journalists, for peace journalists, not the media educator, to be aware that what alternative strategies we can use. And I actually, when I'm working on peace journalism, so what I do is that I call for critical pragmatism. So as a journalist, you should be aware that you are not endangering your own life, but at the same time, very pragmatically, you are cleverly, very intelligently promoting certain perspectives that can come up with some alternative perspectives. And finally, social media, how social media can actually help us to promote the cause of peace communication. Again, a lot of optimism exists about peace communication, but in the context of India and Pakistan, the few studies that we have conducted in these two countries, here we find that we found in these two studies that the powerful military, they are now using social media. They got the skills and the expertise. They're using it for their propaganda purposes. And
excuse me, it's 10 minutes, Dr. Hussain. If you could wrap up for me, please.
Yeah, sure. So
thank you.
So overall, yes, the social media, they do have this capability to promote peace journalism, but at the same time, we need to produce these peace debates within society. Only then probably we would be able to have some very good benefits of peace communication. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much. And we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. So if you have a question for Dr. Hussain, just jot it down and we'll get to it momentarily. So our next guest today is a young woman with whom I've had the chance to collaborate now for 3 or 4 years on an East-West Center project, a cross-border reporting project, and she is Priya Sen. So Priya is an independent journalist based in Delhi. She writes about religion, social justice, politics, environment, and culture. She's reported across India, Asia, the US, Europe, and North Africa. Priya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Steve, and good evening to everybody for being part of this panel. I'm going to start off sharing my screen, just a sec. Right. So I'm going to be looking at peace journalism in South Asia from the perspective of minorities and why it's so important that we look at this very critical category. So I'll start off right off the bat. This is a photo, just keep a note of it. I'm going to come back to this photo eventually. This is a climate meet, which was spearheaded by transgender activists in southern India. And they were talking about how climate change affects sexual minorities. I'm going to come back to this photo eventually. But why minorities? And who are these minorities that we're talking about? From my experience, the minorities I have looked at in India and Asia include sexual minorities, religious minorities, ethnic and linguistic minorities, refugees, riot survivors, women from minority communities, and people living on the borders. Two categories that have been especially important as far as my own reporting is concerned are Pakistani Hindus on the borders, Rohingya refugees, and climate refugees. This is a photo from a story I did a few years ago at a Rohingya refugee camp on the outskirts of Bengal in eastern India. I'm going to come back to this photo again. How do we report on minorities as journalism, incorporating peace journalism practices in the work that we do? And why is it so important that we keep certain principles in mind while working, peace journalism principles in mind while we're reporting minorities? it's so necessary that we move away from the typical conflict discourse to more constructive kind of communication where it's peace framing. It should not be just peace framing versus conflict framing, because there's much more to that than to a story than that, because it's important that as journalists, we focus on the psychological consequences and cost of conflict, you know. So it's important that we see the sufferings of affected communities and the grievances of the perpetrators as well. And we don't just focus on some victims while we neglect others. You know, choice is problematic, but that's where we as peace journalists have an additional responsibility, because problematic choices can spark or even exacerbate conflict. And that is where we have to use certain principles of peace journalism to avoid that from happening. And getting back to the slide, you know, reporting conflict, journalists are here, they should not act as agents to exacerbate or abet conflict. And because in a situation like a riot kind of situation or a very conflict-prone area, we need to act as agents of positive change instead of actually adding fuel to the fire. It's critical that we de-demonize and de-stereotype people living on the margins. And we need to look for common ground with them. And this is critical because we shouldn't be just looking for reporting conflict, but we should be looking for reasons why they arise, how we can mitigate the effects of conflict, and finding meeting points between disagreements. The language is very critical. So we should not be using very strong language where it's not necessary, like genocide or you know, barbaric or something, or words which are very, very powerful, which may not be suitable for the context, may not be suitable to the story. The background check is very important as journalists. So we need to understand why we're dealing with a particular situation at hand in a story. We need to also do the background work in terms of history, the humanitarian law enforcement structures that have been violated, state and non-state actors. So, you know, I'm going to, instead of just going on and on about I'm going to draw some examples from stories I have worked on, so I can throw some light on the peace journalism principles that I have used in trying to make sure that the story also reflects the realities on the ground. So this is one quote from a story I had done a few years ago, which really made a lot of difference to my own life. So this is from a Jesuit priest, where he says that I felt prejudices are so entrenched in both Pakistan and India. It was a cross-border story that I worked on, that it would be impossible to break the veil of hate without an inspired plan. I thought maybe we should begin with children as agents of change. So I'm going to draw on a couple, about as much as possible, 3 stories that I have worked on, where I kind of throw light on peace journalism practices. So here's a story. Going back to the first photo that I shared with you all. This is from a transgender climate meet in Coimbatore, a story that I worked with a Pakistani journalist, where we are looking at the community beyond the usual, the caricaturing of the community, the stereotyping of the community, or even looking at the community in only one particular light. So we are seeing here in this story, which was published in Mangabe, where the transgender community is actually working as agents of change, and it's happening on both sides of the border. So we are looking at examples from India, and we are looking at examples from Pakistan as well. And we see that activists on both sides of the border are actually putting their resources together to talk about how marginalized people can act as agents of change and move things on the ground and actually make a difference in terms of how policymakers view the community. And my colleague from Pakistan, she also worked on the community in Pakistan, and she drew examples from her part of the country. So this is one story that I worked on, and you can have a look at it. It's on Manga Bay. The link is there in the presentation. The other story that I worked on, which was again a cross-border story, where I threw light on. This is another story. Just a second. Yeah. So this is from the. Sorry, this is not the one.
You have about 2 minutes, Priya.
Yeah, quickly. So this is a story which was published again in Religion Unplugged about the Jesuit priest from Eastern India who has been delivering letters to Pakistan from India, letters written by children. So we've only seen India-Pakistan in the light of the conflict between the two countries. So here, instead of just focusing on very typical, way of looking at cross-border kind of exchanges between the two countries, I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective, where one person is actually acting as an agent of change and trying to bring about dialogue between the two countries. And the last story that I worked on is a story on the Rohingya refugees. And so this story, just a second. I'll just wrap up very quick. This story, again, is on, instead of focusing on the crisis of the refugees, which was one of the biggest crises in recent times, I'm looking at how the community is trying to make a home in India. And this was a few years ago. And they've been ostracized by their country. They're not finding a place anywhere, even in the country. So how do they make a home out of a place which doesn't quite feel like home, but they need to make it a home? So this is a story that I worked on for RNS. And this was very interesting because the refugee problem has only been seen in a particular light, in the light of certain framings, again, like the framing of nationalism, the framing of what is newsworthy and what is not newsworthy. So when you're talking to refugees, there are certain principles that you need to keep in mind, and that's what I try to incorporate in my story. So it's moving away from militancy, nationalism, and violence, which were indirectly kind of reflected on in my story. I tried to see the story from a more nurturing perspective, where.
So Priya, could you wrap up for me, please?
Yes, fast. This is what I have tried to avoid when I'm kind of working on these stories. So not ramping up nationalist narratives, not to prioritize diplomacy over authentic journalism, not to cast victims in riot-prone areas in one light only, and getting multiple perspectives, like civilians rendered voiceless during conflict. Also, as journalists, it's so critical that we don't engage in warmongering to increase viewers or readers during conflict or riots. And, ignoring causes and outcomes of conflict and focusing on the sensational or the most visible effects of direct violence. So steering clear of that and going back to the peace journalism practices and how do we report them. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Priya, thank you very much. That was so interesting. If you could do me a favor and take those links and
Yes.
Paste them into the chat for me so that everyone has easy access, I would appreciate it. All right,
Sure.
and
Should I
please
paste?
stop.
Yeah.
So just paste the
second.
links into the chat, or if you want to load the whole file into the chat, that would be okay too.
Okay.
If you could stop sharing for me also, please, that would be great.
I have stopped sharing.
Okay, thank you so much. So our next guest is Gloria Lake. So Gloria Lake Achiro is an award-winning peace journalist from Uganda, a media trainer, and the director of the Peace Journalism Foundation. As a reporter, Gloria highlighted the 2 decades old LRA conflict and its peace processes in northern Uganda. Gloria is also the founder of the Uganda Refugees Online News, RON. She successfully implemented peace journalism projects in Uganda, South Sudan, and Korea. So it's our pleasure. I've been working peace journalism with Gloria since 2008, and it's my distinct pleasure to present to you now, Gloria Lake.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good evening. Here I can say good evening. In Uganda, it is evening. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here speaking to you all. Steve, our first slide will start from the background. Yeah. Well, I want to start with a brief background about the Peace Journalism Foundation. The Peace Journalism Foundation Uganda was established in 2011 by a group of journalists who covered the Lord-resistant army, and this is because of the role of the media in peace process in the northern Uganda LRA war. So we decided to come out with the Peace Journalism Foundation so that we can carry on the peace work. And secondly, we also established the Peace Journalism Foundation in collaboration with Sarah Jane Bradfield. She is a South African-based journalist. And this is a women and youth peace organization, women and youth-led peace organization, and it is the first in the country. What is our goal? Our goal is to prevent media-induced violence, because if you follow Ugandan elections, Ugandan rebellion, like for example, the LRA war, we've been, our war was prolonged because of misuse of word, just like my colleagues from Pakistan and Delhi have just cited about misuse of words. We've had it really here in Uganda, especially the northern Uganda. So our goal in this Peace Journalism Foundation is to try and, prevent media-induced violence. And radio, as you know, has been used many times to incite violence. If you look at the Rwanda genocide, then you look at the conflict in the election violence, 2008 election violence in Western Kenya, which was fueled by misuse of words. So we try to use peace journalism to prevent media-induced violence. Stephen, next slide. So what is our mission? Our mission is to promote peace and non-violence communities in Uganda. How do we do this? We do this through networking. We do this through networking with other peace builders, peace organizations. And then we also do peace reporting, like Pira was talking about, her peace work. We do that. As it is one of our mission, we make sure that we do this peace reporting. Then we collaborate with other organizations. I mentioned at the beginning that we work with peace organizations, yes. So we kind of collaborate in a number of projects that they do. And for us, we take lead as peace journalists. Stephen, next slide. So I want to briefly take you through the kind of work we have so far done in Uganda. First of all, we've been able to train. You cannot talk about peace journalism. You cannot practice peace journalism and achieve the goal of preventing media-induced violence without training the journalists, because many of these journalists come from a background of general news reporting. And in Uganda here, it is, the breaking news, every time a journalist breaks the news is always given more assignment. So that give them very limited room to practice peace journalism. So what we did, we worked closely in collaboration with Center for Global Peace Journalism and Steve here, Professor Steve Youngblood, and we've been able to train over 400 peace journalists, peace reporters. In Uganda, majority in Uganda, a few in Kenya, and a few in South Sudan. What else have we done? We've been able to also work with research, local and international researchers, those who come to Uganda to research about peace journalism. those who come to Uganda to research about humanitarian situation, those who come to Uganda to research about refugees. So we help them. We offer them, first of all, shelter. Then we identify the people they are supposed to interview, to meet. We set up all these meetings. So we work closely with international peace researchers, especially, and a few local researchers in Uganda. Next slide, Steve. Yeah. What else have we done? We've been able to establish a very unique and interesting project to me called a Community Peace Club. Now, Community Peace Clubs, the membership, it is composed of community leaders themselves. And then we put 1 or 2 journalists there. What is this Community Peace Club supposed to do? They play the watchdog role, the watchdog function. Many times nobody watches the media. We go and, like make hate speech on radio. During election, we incite journalists, we incite communities the way we report, the words we use. So we decided, we introduced this during the project with Youngblood, Professor Youngblood in Uganda, that we need a watchdog for the media, and we need the community leaders to take charge of peace in their community. So through this interesting club, we established 6 of them across Uganda, but we selected in the hotspot districts which are known for election violence. So these peace clubs move from election monitoring to even solving land conflict. We have so many land conflicts in Uganda. The Peace Club is taking lead and supporting in helping out in the land conflict in some of these few selected places across the country. And why do we have the media as a member of the Peace Club? Before I forget, why we need the media? Because the Peace Club is a voluntary organized, as a voluntary group. They don't have funding to pay for airtime in this radio station. So when we have a manager as a member in the radio station, it is good for 2 reasons. One, the manager will give free airtime under social responsibility, giving back to the community. And the second reason is when there is a hate speech said on that radio, the manager is able to go and talk to the very host or the producer or the talk show, whoever, the moderator, that look, I've got complaint that on such and such a day, your talk show, somebody incited violence or made a hate speech. So the radio is responsible to go and correct, because the manager already has, he knows how important peace is. That's why a manager is also a member, a radio manager is a member of the Community Peace Club. Then what we've also done is we managed to do a very good project also with Professor Steve Youngblood. We did a media and counterterrorism project. And this media and counterterrorism project, we ended up training 150 community leaders, local leaders, security, and the journalists. We put them in one class and we trained 150 on how they can collaborate and work together in preventing violence in Uganda, extreme violence, terrorism act. So we thought that at least the media and security and local leaders sit together and map a way out. And this was also a very successful project that we've undertaken in Uganda. Steve, next slide. The other next project that we've also been able to do in line with our work and interventions in Uganda is we cannot do peace journalism in Uganda without having our own news supporting project. Like my colleagues from Delhi was telling us our experience. We have very beautiful, I really love this news project. One is the Voice for Peace and Development. The Voice for Peace and Development, it is an online news coverage about successful peace stories. For example,
so Gloria, excuse me, you have about 2 minutes left, about 2 minutes.
Okay. So we have the Voice for Peace and Development, where we bring out, success stories of peacemakers. Then we have the Refugee Online News. The Refugee Online News, it is for refugees, by refugees, and about refugees. We've offered them this platform under the Peace Journalism Foundation because we have so many exiled refugees who are living in Uganda. And unfortunately, they have no media platform where they can practice. So through RON, we've given them that platform. They can report from the refugee settlement camps. And at the same time, they can use that platform to highlight issues back in their country while living in exile. Next slide, Stevie. We have a reporting contest. This reporting contest, we are supposed to be doing it annually, whereby we recognize peace reporters. Unfortunately, because of funding, this has been pending a little bit. Oh, Stevie, next slide. And our upcoming activities, we are planning to introduce peace and election training project this year in South Sudan because they have election this year. Then we're also planning to introduce a peace journalism project in DR Congo, Eastern DR Congo, near Uganda, where there's a lot of violence. Then we also want to train Ugandan journalists on extreme violence reporting. We have a lot of violence here related to land, the misperception that every Muslim is a terrorist. We want to try and tackle that, you know. So that is one of the activities that we want to do in Uganda. Stephen, next step.
So Gloria, that's 10 minutes. Why don't you go
Yes.
on ahead and just summarize?
Okay, I'm going to summarize, yes. Let's go to next up to way forward. Yes, up to way forward. Before I talk about way forward, let me just say we are limited. We have a lot of activities that we are doing, but we are limited with funding, and we are also limited with sometimes climate change. Some parts of Uganda, South Sudan, Eastern DR Congo, it is impossible because of climate change. And also we have issues to do with insecurity, like in Western Uganda, we have the ADF, then South Sudan, we have war. And as a way forward, as I move to conclude, way forward, gatherings such as this one by the George Washington University, it is very, very good because it gives us room to evaluate what we are doing. And I really, really want to appeal to Baba, if you can do more of this, at least in a year, we can have twice where we get together and map, we see where we've not done well, we see room for improvement, we see what needs to be done. And probably we need also to look into areas of funding. We need funding for us to implement all these beautiful programs that we have in Delhi, in Uganda, in Pakistan. We need funding support. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Gloria, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next time you give me 20 minutes, Stevie.
I know that all of you could easily, have 20 minutes or 20 hours worth of compelling content, but unfortunately, the format limits us a bit. So, without any further ado, and last and certainly not least, is Rose Oba. So Rose is the national coordinator for the CCMN, the Cameroon Community Media Network. This year, she is a Rotary Peace Fellow based at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda. Rose, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and greetings to everyone. I'm just going to get straight on. We are talking about growing peace journalism, and this time I want to use the case study of the Cameroon Community Media Network. And of course, it came in the wake of the Anglophone crisis, so I'm going to talk about the two. So we all know that peace journalism, particularly in the context of the Anglophone crisis, faces unique challenges, but also presents opportunities for promoting dialogue, understanding, and of course, reconciliation, and by extension, providing a safe space for us to actually promote the growth of peace journalism. And it will be interesting for us to know a little bit about the Anglophone crisis and why the Cameroon Community Media Network put in place some strategies that can be able to help de-escalate the violence on the ground that has gone on for over 7 years. And so this crisis is about predominantly English-speaking regions of the country, that is 2 regions out of 8, that had grievances over perceived marginalization and of course, discrimination against the government of Cameroon. And this led to a peaceful protest in 2016. And this led to later on a violent protest whereby the military came in to intervene and definitely used a violent measure to stop the peaceful protest. And this definitely escalated. And it should be noted that the crisis has resulted in significant human rights abuses and, of course, displacement and economic disruptions. And with efforts to resolve the conflicts ongoing amidst complex political, social, and of course, ethnic dynamics. And here is how CCMN is coming in. And it's also kind enough for me to also let us know that the Cameroon Community Media Network is a network of community radio stations, newspapers, TV stations, and print bloggers. And they are dedicated to promoting community-driven media and amplifying local voices across Cameroon. And it is established in response to the need for inclusive and participatory media platforms. And CCMN operates with the objective of providing marginalized communities, particularly in rural and undeserved areas, with access to information, dialogue, and civic engagement. And so through this network of community radio stations and digital platforms, CCMN has been able to facilitate open dialogue, foster peace-building initiatives, and advocate for press freedom and media pluralism. With a focus on localization, community engagement, and ethical journalism practices, CCMN continues to play a vital role in the promotion of social cohesion, democratic participation, and of course, sustainable development in Cameroon. We can't even talk about peace journalism in Cameroon without mentioning Professor Stephen Youngblood. So we doff our hats to him for actually bringing us peace journalism around 2017, 2018. And so CCMN has actually been providing platform for peace journalism in Cameroon. And this is in the wake of this crisis. And one of the things it has been doing is to actually curb the hate on the online space. And of course, which has translated to physical violence. And journalists have been able to learn the art of working on their reports, trimming all hate words, inside interviews made by either the separatist fighters or the government officials in order to provide non-violent options for communities to take as approaches to solving their conflicts. Amidst that, we find out that journalists and media personnel affiliated with CCMN have often faced the risk and intimidation, particularly in conflict-affected areas in Cameroon. But then, this has not stopped us from doing so much in terms of growing peace journalism. And this is one of the ways in which we've been able to go to an extent to grow peace journalism. And that is providing platforms on our different radio stations, on our blogs, and on our TV stations by promoting dialogue and understanding. We bring major actors of the conflict to actually sit on the table to discuss the root causes of their own problems. Because usually before, you will find out that in the war journalism side of it, you will always be one-sided, and this was actually escalating the situation on the ground. So we now bring actors from two sides to actually air out their concerns and also provide solutions as to the way forward. One of the growing concerns that CCMN is so concerned about is highlighting local voices and solutions. We train our journalists in the art of storytelling. We train our journalists in the art of actually reflecting local voices in their stories, because we realize that editorial lines, when journalists, community media journalists work under operators of media who are business oriented, they never want to embrace peace journalism. So we now encourage them, train them on the art of blogging, and about 80% of community media practitioners are now owning blogs that can be used as platforms to provide conflict-sensitive approaches to resolving conflicts. And of course, CCMN prioritizes reporting on local initiative and community-driven solutions. And we have amplified this through using the voices of grassroots activists, traditional leaders, and ordinary citizens. And this is to ensure the perspective of those who are affected by the crisis. And of course, we continue to train our journalists on conflict-sensitive reporting because it emphasizes accuracy, balance, and empathy, and also enables journalists to also recognize the consequences of their reporting. Either they fan the flames or they de-escalate the situation. And of course, we do not lose sight of the fact that our community media actors within the network usually sit together quarterly to do a situational analysis of the violence on the ground, check out the actors, do a conflict mapping to see the actors that are still perpetrating the violence on the ground. And then, of course, we come up with reports to also task those actors on what needs to be done to de-escalate the conflict on the ground. Of course, what needs to be done as the way forward? We need to expand peace journalism in Cameroon continuously. And this is what we've decided to embark on in the days ahead. And one of it is to localize and engage more of community. And we are prioritizing local perspectives and also getting more and more people who are involved in, who are under the minority population to speak up and also be adding their voices to the solutions that are needed to de-escalate the violence on the ground. We are also making sure that trust and credibility is built, not only within the community media or the media and the public. We are also making sure that we provide reports that can be able to ensure that parties start building trust among themselves to come together to start talking and finding solutions to their problems. Of course,
you have about 2 minutes, Rose.
Doing
Excuse
all of
me.
this
You have
is
about
so
2 minutes.
risky. Thank you. I'm getting towards the end. Thank you, Prof. So we are ensuring that media organizations within Cameroon, away from the CCMN, provide training, resources, and support to journalists. Currently, we are working on a manual for peace journalism in Cameroon that will be handed to all newsrooms in Cameroon so that they can be able to have it as their second Bible away from the ethics of the journalism profession. Of course, we are going to continue to partner with actors in the peace-building process who have decided to have the CCMN as one of the key actors in peace-building processes in Cameroon, which is an applaudable issue. Of course, CCMN is also capitalizing on utilizing digital platforms, and this is actually using the social media platform, mobile technologies, and of course the different blogs that we have to embark on literacy programs and also innovative storytelling techniques that can effectively convey messages of peace and reconciliation. And last but not the least, CCMN is currently fostering collaboration and partnerships with other networks, civil society groups, government agencies, and equally adding their voice to more education and training of student journalists in universities so that before they come out, we can form a greater pool of peace journalists that can be able to effect positive change in terms of growing peace journalism. And so to conclude, by incorporating such lessons into our practices, we believe that media organizations and journalists in Cameroon can actually contribute to the promotion of peace and reconciliation and social cohesion amidst the challenges of the Anglophone crisis. There is a lot of hate, and we are doing quite a whole lot, because if we de-escalate the hate and also try to bring parties together, that will be one step ahead to resolving or de-escalate the crisis on the ground. Thank you very much.
Rose, thank you. And thanks to all four of our presenters for just outstanding presentations, very thoughtful. I always learn something when I hear and talk to each of these four presenters. So at this point, we have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. If you're in the audience and you have a question, you can either raise your hand or type the question into the chat. I'm going to take the prerogative of the moderator and ask the first question. And the first question is for, and if you could keep your responses brief, please, so we can get as many questions as possible. My first question is for Professor Hussein and for Priya, and that is, what can journalists in South Asia do to break away from these patriotic, nationalistic narratives? Priya, you want to start? You're muted, Priya.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. The way I look at the problem is instead of just focusing on, the framings in terms of the nationalistic, militaristic kind of framings, and when it comes to conflict reporting, we move away from that and we look at stories more from the human point of view, from the people's point of view. So we can kind of get into the realities on the ground from the point of view of the people themselves. So in that sense, you're humanizing the story. You're also getting the realities on the ground through their voices and through their stories. So that's how I would kind of, how I would use a story and do a story which humanizes the effects of conflict and looks at more
thank you.
The invisible effects of conflict.
Thank you. Dr. Hussein, what would you add to that?
I think such a difficult situation because the military and the politicians of two countries invested too much in this sector for tuning animosity between the two countries. And it is actually paying to them because they are getting elected, they're electrifying the audiences. So they're actually getting a lot of benefits from it. Now, how to counter it? I think first there is a need to introduce the whole culture of debate within the society, because with the population in the two countries, highly generated these forces, they are getting a lot of support from the people. So I think that first in these two countries we need to kickstart the process of debate. Once the debate is started, probably in the next phase we will be able to have this dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. I see a question from James. James, what is your question? Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Chanwa James from Uganda, a refugee staying in Kirano refugee settlement. Now, what I want to know is, like, we who are within the settlement and we are living, we are the refugees and we are within the settlement. What strategies should we always follow to report cases or to report issues in the settlement which may not provoke discussion, maybe we may not provoke anything in line with the stakeholders, because we have the stakeholders, we have the government and the refugees, so that we report issues which may not bring confusion or which may not bring conflict among the refugees, stakeholders, and the government.
Thank you, James. Gloria, why don't you answer that and unmute, please?
Okay. Hello, James. James, thank you very much for that question. We have been working with a number of refugees in Kiriandongo, and I think this is James Chanwat. James Chanwat, unfortunately, you've not been able to attend one of our peace journalism classes, because if you had attended, at least you'd have clue on how to report about peace, about refugee issues or IDP issues. We have that in our peace journalism syllabus. However, for now, if you have a story, what I can say, if you have a story and it is ready, you've written, feel free to send them to me and I edit for you. Because you just can't write a story. It's a bit sensitive in refugee settlement, but I know for sure, or you can send them to Professor Steve Youngblood, you can ask for help. But generally with editing, there's nothing unique. Even the editing in the newsroom, So long as we are objective in what we are doing, in the report that you've made, you can always go ahead and cover the story, right? But send it to an editor to look through.
Gloria, thank you very much. So I have a question for Rose. So Rose and her colleagues at the Cameroon Community Media Network have had tremendous success expanding the network and bringing journalists on board. So I'm interested, Rose, if you could share with your colleagues, what's the secret of your success? How have you all been so successful in growing the Cameroon Community Media Network?
Thank you, Prof. I think it's just about being inclusive because if you see the Anglophone crisis, the English-speaking and the French-speaking expressions, it's the problem. But we've decided that this network is going to have members from the English-speaking and the French-speaking extraction so that they can be able to see, just from our example, how we operate. And we've been able to have members from all 10 regions of Cameroon. And in this way, we can be able to actually work on analyzing conflicts from different areas of interest. It can be land disputes, it can be ethnic disputes, it can be the violent crisis we have today. I just picked only the Cameroon's Anglophone crisis. And we've been able to move from one region to the other to bring together the journalists, have a talk with them about peace journalism, and to also see the need to not only because people have this issue of peace journalism being an advocacy stuff, but we told them peace journalism is not actually a direct advocacy. We are providing the platform for advocates to use. We are providing the platform for local voices that have hardly been heard, that can provide solutions to the conflicts and even invite humanitarian concerns or assistance to areas that are so difficult. So these.
So Rose, you're breaking up.
Enable of even fact check and. Yeah, so we are able to actually work as a network where we can be able to share concerns, share best practices, and also see how we can be able to help.
So Rose, thank you very much for that. You're having a few problems, but we've come to the end of our session at any rate. Let me thank again Rose Oba, Gloria Lake, Priya Sen, and Dr. Shabir Hussein for your outstanding presentations. Our last word today will come from Babak Badour, who will tell you a little bit about next week's presentation. Sir.
Great, and thank you, Steve Youngblood, for your moderating. You did a fantastic job as always. Thank you again to all our presenters. I think this is a unique Zoom call because we literally have many continents here all together. We have a moderator from Moldova. We have presenters from several African countries, South Asia, and I'm in North America. So it's just good to see this global communication taking place so well. Thank you for everyone who attended. Just briefly, next week will be actually our final webinar, and we're going to try to look at how to grow peace journalism, looking at some innovations that are taking place both within journalism and social media. As we know, much of the news today travels on social media, so we're going to bring together a few experts who have researched on how news content goes viral, like what makes the news go viral, because one of the issues of peace journalism is just getting it out there in front of many people. And if we can learn lessons from other areas of innovation, such as social media virality, then I think we can get the peace journalism out there more. So hopefully you can all attend that, and we can keep learning about how to do peace journalism better and make it grow. So thank you very much, everyone.